First of all, thank you for coming. I'm sure um, many of you are from here or from Bay Area, and I also make this leap of faith that you, just like me, have interest or, so to speak, infatuation with Dali because he truly is a great artist, and um, many, of course, regard him as a genius of his age. And and I hope you had a chance to see museum before that because I'll be making some references to some of the work that is in this museum. So first of all, I'm gonna kind of give you a little bit sketch of how I wanted to handle this um, presentation. Since this is the first in the series that we're going to do over the next few months, I thought it was appropriate to kind of address the questions that I tend to be asked most of the time, or most frequent questions, so to speak. And these questions keep coming up, and I think it's appropriate then to address them today because it clears up a lot of um, um, reasons behind this collection, and also kind of elaborates more on what is the art that Salvador Dali created that is in this museum. So there will be typically 4 questions that I'm usually asked. Number 1, why or how did I start collecting? Number 2, why was it exactly Salvador Dali? The other question is often asked is, why Monterey? And the last one that people tend to ask is, what is the lithograph? What is the original lithograph? And how it is reflects on the importance of the work that this artist has created. I'm going to take it basically in this order. So I was fairly young. I was just finishing my studies at Cal. Year was 1989, and as Katya said, I was an athlete and I was preparing for '92 Olympics, which will happen to be in Barcelona. So I had visited Barcelona around that time, first time, and everything kind of that associated with Spain and Barcelona had a special place in my heart because I was an aspiring athlete and I was preparing for Olympic trials. So while in Barcelona, I visited Museum Salvador Dali. It's actually a small town near Barcelona, about half an hour to an hour. And of course, I was very impressed with collection. And I came there in the summer, and I was very unfortunate because it took about an hour and a half to get inside the museum. The line literally was around the block. Lots of tourists. It's apparently most visited museum in Spain. Over 1 million people come there every year. So it became almost like a monument to Salvador Dali. As you arrive, you have sculptures outside the buildings that are monumental. They are 10 to 20 feet in height. And it's actually called Museum Theater Salvador Dali. It's very elaborative. Thousands of different artworks, original pieces that he created, and of course there are paintings and lithographs and etchings and all kind of sculptures that he created in original molds. So I was very impressed and very fascinated with the work, and it just happened on one of my outings in San Francisco. I was walking around in Embarcadero, but more towards the Ghirardelli Square. There was a gallery that I stumbled upon, and of course I recognized some of his work. That kind of aroused more interest because all I heard about his work is that it's sold in the millions to originals. Of course, every now and then you hear it comes up, Picasso, Dali, 20, 100 million. And that gallery was selling lithographs. Of course, 1989, 1990, as you're aware, there was no internet, there was no quick reference to look around, and so educational aspect of trying to educate yourself. How is somebody claims that original work at Sotheby's sells for 2,500 million, and then here you could buy $5,000, $10,000 original work as well. So I started to research. I started to try to understand what was a lithograph and what was original lithograph and how it was created. And because I realized that I wanted to own part of the history, part of the artist that I grown to like. So, and then as I did more and more research then and educated myself, I realized that while Salvador Dali is known as a painter, majority of his work, artistic work, he dedicated on creating lithographs and etching. Now, many artists do that. Once they recognize internationally and as demand grows, they shift their activities towards lithographic work. So if they create a painting, then they authorize limited production of lithographs, which are created, or etchings, although etchings is originals. There's no other media that they exist. Now, what's unique about Salvador Dali is that he created original lithograph. It's a very extensive process, and it dates hundreds of years back. And it's, as you know, and I will show with a video, it's very difficult process. Now, Dali typically took between a year and 2 years to create one painting. And you could imagine during his time, he had a very elaborate lifestyle, very flamboyant, and he traveled a lot, and he liked beautiful things. And so I think he quickly realized as he became more and more famous that it's very difficult to create a painting and then to have a buyer for a painting that cost thousands and thousands of dollars at that time. So he was introduced into process of lithography and etchings by Picasso. In fact, one of his first work was Picasso who actually committed him to do the work instead of himself. And that work is actually here at the museum. Now, there's about 300 paintings that he has created during his lifetime, and about 1,500 lithographs and etching during the same period. As I said before, it's very complex and very difficult process to create lithograph. But the advantages, of course, is that you create numbers of the same work. It is, in lithograph, it's usually between 10 and it could go into hundreds. Now, many artists, like I said, created lithographs, and they usually used one of the paintings. Dali actually created the originals because he worked on it himself. Now, Picasso, Chagall, lithographs, they also cost in tens of thousands. But most of them are authentic, although they're authentic and done under supervision of artists. They didn't do it themselves. They went to lithographic studios, and the artists there reproduced their work. Lithographic stones that are very big and bulky and heavy. And in one of the books I read, Dali created Don Quixote series that is also upstairs as you come in the stairs on the right side. And he created it in the stones, and during the process he said the stones were so heavy and he was carrying them up and down the stairs, and he used seawater, he used gun to shoot, pellet gun that shot colors at the stones to create them. And he was very upset because he always was covered in grease and had physical disability because of that. Some of those lithographs have up to 20 colors. In fact, there's decomposition that exists that for each color he had to create a new stone. And so the first image that was created would be buffed off completely because those stones are very heavy, very expensive. and he would create a new image. And he would basically have to draw in reverse. And of course, after he's done with the stones, he reuses them many times, or stones typically destroyed. So there is no original artwork. So some people ask, well, where is the original? They say, no, this is it original. There's nothing else left. Now, he chose this process because he was um, very drawn to the fact that he could create hundreds of those, and it's a lot easier to sell, and he could sell them to 10, 20 different galleries, and they went really quickly. And he was found, so to speak, a media that he loved to work with, and he could get compensated fairly easy. Now, of course, during the 80s, when Dali could no longer work, his work became very popular, and there were a lot of fakes that were created, and people represented that Dali had signed the papers or created the work, which he actually didn't. And there was a lot of confusion in the market during the very early 80s. In fact, Sotheby and Christie couldn't tell the difference between originals and authentic Dalis and fake. So in the 90s, a few catalogs appeared, and Christie's and Sotheby's started to sell them along the side with Picassos and Chagall's, etc. And it became a lot more popular again to collect Salvador Dali. Now, like I said, he created a lot of images, and most of them came in form of portfolios. Portfolio 5 to 10 to sometimes 100 pieces. Like if you saw Sacred Bible series, it had 100 original lithographs. It obviously took him a long time to create those stones, but the advantage, as I said, he could create more than one of them. So once I kind of understood the process and understood, it became I became fascinated with his work in this graphic work, especially because it occurred to me that while paintings, 300, scattered all over the world, and many of them in private collections and different museums, and it's, you know, in order to appreciate the full extent to which his work is available, it's a difficult process. But it is conceivable to have a large retrospective view on his work. Now, that brings in next question: why Monterey? Why have a museum here? Many of you probably already know the answers to this question, because during the time when Europe was engulfed in the World War II, Dali escaped to safety of the United States. Now, he could have lived anywhere. In fact, he stayed in New York a few times. He also, I believe, visited Hawaii, but he chose Monterey as his residence from 1941 to 1948, 49. During this time, he did work. He created and he tried to penetrate the market of Hollywood, in fact. He created some stage designs for Spellbound, the pictures of which you see for Hitchcock movie that was filmed actually here in Salinas, I believe. And let's progress on this. This is him and Gregory Peck. This is the stage, and that was part of the movie. Now, with Disney, he created decorations and design for cartoon Destino. It's only until recently, it wasn't until recently, that it actually was produced. And we show this cartoon in this theater, which design was made by Salvador Dali. Of course, at the time when he created the images, Disney and the board of directors, I guess, decided that it wasn't appropriate for the public because some of the images were too grotesque. But nevertheless, I guess they came to their senses and decided to finish the work. So next, I'm going to show some of the images that were created while he lived here in Monterey and Pebble Beach in Monterey area. This is a portrait of Miss Harold McCormick, and location is unknown. And that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the difficulty of viewing his work. This is portrait of Dorothy Speculoos, and this is located in De Young. It was done in 1942, and it is in San Francisco. This is portrait. Oh, this is not a portrait. This is a geopolitical child watching the birth of new man, 1943. And this is in St. Petersburg, Florida. There is a museum dedicated to Salvador Dali, as many of you might know. This one is very interesting one, and it is located in Figueres. Dali Teatro Museum. He painted in 1943, and it's called Poetry of America. You could see right in the middle there's a Coca-Cola bottle, and kind of surrealistic view of the third world, Africa sagging, and America is a new world, and the athletic bodies basically is glorified, so to speak, with helmets of American football. So Lady Louise Mountbatten, again, private collection. This is Broken Bridge of Dreams, 1945. It is in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now, the last one is actually an etching. Many of you might have seen a large press that is upstairs. It was part of the museum here. It's not mine, so to speak. This press was used in the mint to create early money in the United States. And when California became part of the United States, it was shipped to Monterey, that used to be a capital of California and Mexico. But the interesting part, Dali has used that press to create the etchings. Now, etchings are usually just one color. He etches the plate. It's either copper or steel with the diamond sharp object, and then applies grease, again, similar process to lithography, and prints the image. And it's also happened to be the most rare and most expensive one. Although he created about 200 of those, it worth between $50,000 and $100,000. I do not own this and have not seen it ever come up on the market through Sotheby's or Christie's, but this definitely would be on the list of things to own and to bring back to Monterey. So this is part of the questions that that I had to address to kind of explain the reasons behind the collection, how it's all started, why it all started, and why Salvador Dali. My first one, actually, I do not remember, because on that I was present for section, and I bought like 10 or 15. And when I brought them home, people thought, well, what's going on here? I mean, they thought that was excessive. And I said, yeah, I just loved it. I pulled off. But there were a couple pieces, and one of the most memorable was Diamond Head. It's not on the floor because we couldn't figure out the spacing of it. Diamond Head is three ladies in Hawaiian outfit, so to speak, against Diamond Head in Hawaii. And that was amongst one of the pieces. And there also was some bas-reliefs that we will be adding on very soon to exposition that were part of the acquisition.